And I hope you can hear me clearly.
Very clearly, sir.
First of all, we want to, of course, express our gratitude to Multimedia and Joy for the prime time support that you give to advocacy in this country by allowing us to explain these things to the people. The second thing is to reestablish again that we are all here discussing this issue because the fourth estate, with policy support from, or policy analysis support from ACEP, the Africa Center for Energy Policy, decided to delve deep into these matters, produce a documentary which sparked this whole investigation. In the president's release, if you read it carefully, nowhere does he mention this. He ends up praising KPMG, which was paid to do this work. Not a single word of support for the fourth estate and the like. We are happy at Imani that we're providing additional support to ACEP. We've done that already. We continue to do that going forward. But I think it's important in this country we recognize when people are contributing to public service. Let's take issues one by one. Some of them you've already, quite extensively hinted at them. What are SML's contracted services? There are four main ones. They do transaction audit services. Essentially, they look over your shoulder if you present information related particularly to import duties and taxes that are at the port level. So I'm not going to go into great detail, but you know that these SML's involvement in this activity in Ghana was based on an attempt to single source them to provide a service, when at that time, SML, in June 27, when this was done, had just been incorporated. Bear that in mind. In June 2017, when attempts were made to bring SML to come and provide these transaction audit services, even though companies like West Blue and others were already performing it at the port, SML had no track record, not only in this particular line of business, but in auditing in general. And in this country, we have many auditing companies with capacity to do anti-fraud, etc., etc. This company had no background, nobody ahead of them. Somehow, somebody at the finance ministry or GRA had heard of their unique competencies when they are not being formed as a company. So that by June 2017, they were attempting to single source them to provide the service, which is to audit transactions related to tax revenue at the ports. 3 times they went to the Public Procurement Authority. And 3 times the Public Procurement Authority, which usually is not very strong as a bulwark against what politicians want to do, said that for this one we cannot approve. It's too problematic. So what did they do? GRA engaged the company as a subcontractor for West Blue. And then what did they do? They eventually kicked West Blue out. There was a huge scandal in this country for many, many months as the government attempted to impose new providers in the ports. When West Blue was kicked out, without PPA approval, this company was then made the main contractor. Then they added another service to it, external price verification. Essentially, when we are bringing things from overseas, the price of the item is correlated with the tax you pay. But if you lie about how much you bought the item for, you could change the amount of tax you pay in Ghana. So we want you to verify how much the pricing is before that item is brought to the country. We added that to SML. At that time, not even the board of GRA was aware. Somehow, somebody in power had determined that this company must be inserted in, regardless of what it takes. Secondly, no PPA approval. Then they decided that, this company is too good. And these matters happened very quickly before we had established any of these benefits, etc. And CBOAD or Ernst & Young reports and things like that are coming. Remember, keep that in mind. They decided then that they had to add another service to the list, which was the downstream petroleum monitoring, which simply means that when you go and buy petrol at the filling station, that tax that you are supposed to pay there, the OMC is supposed to collect it and take it to the government. Sometimes they don't do that. For that reason, they are going to help to prevent it. And I'll explain later on in the presentation why that makes no sense. And there's no logical basis for any of these arguments. Then, when it became very apparent that time was running, there was no approval, but much of this has not been regularized. Eventually, the government decided that, okay, we need to insert SML into the biggest port of all, the oil that is produced in Ghana offshore, and the gold and diamonds and other things that we produce in the country inshore. So what do? We set up a contract in which every single ounce of gold produced in this country, they will get a percentage. Every single ounce of gold, 0.75%. And every single barrel of oil that we produce in this country, this company will get 0.75% off the price of that oil. It was at that point that it was quite clear that this was going to be a massive bonanza for whoever it is that supports this agenda. So we need to get regularization. It was at that point that the matter was taken to the board. It was at that point that the matter was taken to PPA for ratification. Because remember, this company was already in there and was doing the business anyway. So whatever PPA wanted to do at that point was more or less moot. So this is the history of the SML agenda. It's important that people bear that in mind. These are facts established by the president himself based on his review of the KPMG agreement. And let's go on to the second key issues. There are two aspects of the KPMG reports, which nobody has seen except the president, a few people. There are facts that KPMG has established, and then there are analysis that KPMG has done on the facts based on which it's made recommendations. It's very important that we separate the two, otherwise you get confused. So the key facts that KPMG established is what you've established, which is what you've described to your viewers. One of them being that the services are illegal. They are illegal because even the new contract that has been ratified by PPA and signed by the board, because of the Public Financial Management Act being multi-year contract, they must go back to Parliament. So until this contract, the current contract, the 2023 contract that governs the arrangement, and for which this company has been paid 1 billion Ghana cedis, until that contract goes back to Parliament, everything they are doing there is illegal. That's a fact that is established by KPMG. This is not analysis. The second fact is that, as I've already said, on the back of this illegality, 1 billion cedis have been paid. The third is that PPA does not have the power to retrospectively clear illegalities. The fourth is that in all of this, we are giving money to the company without knowing how much the company is spending and whether indeed the cost of these services warrants that kind of payments. No investment appraisals were done. In fact, when they were asked to provide documents to enable KPMG establish how much it is that they've invested in this service, they refused to provide the documents, or they could not provide enough documents. Another fact that has also been established that there was no need for need analysis or value for money assessment. The president has now asked the Ministry of Finance and the GRA to go ahead and act on his instructions. We expect them to issue a press release telling us what exactly they will do. But first and foremost, there must be a value for money analysis. And the CSO movement in this country have offered pro bono services from tax analysts and petroleum economists around the world that will ensure that they don't spend additional money, unlike the money that has already been spent on this report. We also know that the live contract that exists today, the 2023 contract, still entitles SML to make almost $100 million a year for 10 years. Why is it 10 years? Because a 5-year contract, renewable again. And we know from the history of this company that there is no way in which that renewal will not be achieved. But at the very least, if you are doing an analysis, you look at exposure, and that exposure includes the possibility of renewal. So where do we get $100 million from? You look at the likely price increases in minerals and petroleum over the time, historical trend, and then you compute what would be the likely price. Then you strike that 0.75% for oil prices and the $0.75 per barrel for oil. So you look at production, and then you strike the 0.75% for price of gold, manganese, and other things we sell, and that's where we come with the we come to the $1 billion. We are happy to look at alternative analysis if SML or KPMG have done it, but this is based on what we have looked at from projections point of view. So these are the critical fact finding that KPMG made. Now, when KPMG moves from the facts to making analytical conclusions and then using that to make recommendations, here we have a problem. We have a problem because, as we stated from the outset, KPMG has a conflict of interest in this matter. It's been a service provider to GRA. It regularly looks for new business from GRA. We did not see how KPMG was going to be strict on GRA sufficiently because of this underlying challenge that it's continuing to do business with GRA and looks forward to getting more business from GRA. So that was a problem. We saw that in South Africa when KPMG was brought in to review the famous Gupta contracts. And here, because of the fact that KPMG had these public sector contracts, it could not do a sufficiently objective job. And the fact of the matter is that KPMG's findings are now being misrepresented, even at the factual level. So even the facts that I've just said to you, people are trying to, spin and claim that KPMG have cleared SML. That's not what has happened. So KPMG's reputation impacted by this matter. And we know what happened in South Africa. KPMG leaders had to be sacked. KPMG more or less was almost kicked out of that country because of a similar situation where they were brought in to review a public sector contract and they could not do the job sufficiently. So my argument is that we must stick to the facts that they found, they established, because the facts are facts. Analysis and recommendations, we don't think KPMG is the right entity to do that because it's commercial interest. Secondly, there have also been analyses that are actually flawed. So forget about the conflict of interest. And when you look at KPMG's history in some of these matters, where you have these very sensitive matters, from the Rolls-Royce matter to the FIFA matter to the Co-op Bank to the HBOS, there have been consistent patterns where sometimes, because it's in a bank, it has a client that is also supposed to safeguard. It makes some of these analytical conclusions that leads to either losses or in some cases leads to corruption. So it's a very well established pattern, and you can see on the screen major events in the world that anybody can go and check, from the Rolls-Royce, FIFA, HBOS issues, etc., etc. Now we come to the core of the matter. Do we need SML at all in this chain? First and foremost, there is the National Petroleum Authority. There is the main regulator in the sector. They are the ones who look at everything to do with the downstream petroleum sector. So all the fuel you buy, all the LPG, the aviation fuel, etc., etc., etc. Now, NPA has been telling this country that it is doing exactly what the SML claims it's doing for many years now, collecting millions of dollars to pay all manner of contractors. And on the basis of that, it's been telling us that there's been about 41% growth as of 2022 based on this work. We also know, in addition to spending all of these millions of dollars doing these specific activities, they've enlisted the Vice President of Ghana and his office to become a major proponent of the digitalization of the entire value chain. We have the ERDMS that was mentioned in the documentary. That means that you cannot load fuel in this country unless the government knows about it. Which means that there are flow meters that have already been established, not only at the level of the depot, but also at the retail level, and connecting the two. We know that money has been spent to import machinery from Singapore and elsewhere, by ACIS and North Africa, to do exactly the kind of things that SML is doing, to put flow meters at the depot, and they've already started at the retail level, and they are continuing. They are spending more money. The National Petroleum Authority tells us that the pilot was successful. 4,000 filling stations were identified. 20 of them were used for the pilot. They are buying more equipment and implementing it there. And they set up a command center, and then they are putting some of these flow meters in depots as well to connect the depots to the command center, and then connect the retail centers, the retail outlets to the command center. So it's very simple. So NPA is doing this automation at the retail level, and it's also decided to do it at the wholesale level. Then what exactly do we need another company to come in and put in another ultrasonic flow meters, etc., in these same locations, purporting to do the same thing? Either one of them is lying to us. Because if you look at the tenders that NPA has floated in this country to transform the whole fuel value chain, which everybody can go online and look at those tenders and the rest of it, and look at the descriptions of those projects, there's absolutely no difference. On top of that, the GRA itself, even before icons came to the picture, GCNet had incorporated their system, the GCMS, into the ERDMS. So essentially, when the fuel arrives in the port, it's already declared into a system that both GRA and NPA knows. And then it's connected to the ERDMS. So meaning that if you go and later pick fuel up from any depot, that fuel that you picked up is already flagged. The problem has always been that in between transmission, they claim that there are technical losses. How you find out technical losses does not depend on the flow meter at one point or the other. That's why I take that fuel from the depot, and some of it leaks on my way to the refill station. No flow meter or whatever will be able to address that matter. The only thing we can know is that you take 100 here, you deposited 80 here. So we are now sure that only 80 liters are now taxable. That we can know. And that system is already in place by connecting icons, ERDMS, and the flow meters that NPA is continuing to now implement at the level of the depots, and which millions of dollars are being spent. We know, for instance, that the industry members, which is what my very good friend Bemboache explained to you in the documentary, have stated that the work that SML is doing, the structure of the solution itself, is not viable because it's based on temperature shifts and temperature patterns that are not reconcilable with the way in which NPA has set up the whole arrangement, which is that you must transport at 20 degrees Celsius. And they have said this openly. Everybody in the industry is aware that these claims have been made, that the Honeywell, SCADA, and remote terminal unit and the rest that the company SML is reporting to use is not compatible with the NPA structure that they've set up in the industry. We will now come to the heart of the matter. And here is where we disagree with KPMG the most, if indeed what the president is saying they said is the case. And it's in KPMG's interest that this report comes out, because people will continue to misrepresent what they did for whitewashing purposes. But if indeed that's what they said, that there have been incremental value increase in the volume of fuel consumed, let's bring all of this down. They are saying that Ghanaians are buying more petrol. And because Ghanaians are buying more petrol, more taxes are being paid. And all of that is due to the work of SML. The question that we have to ask you is, historically, were we seeing increases in fuel consumption before SML came? Have the rate of increase changed to the point where we can say that SML's intervention has made a difference? Look at the graph that is on the screen. You will see that the pattern of increases in how much fuel we consume in this country is linked strictly to economic conditions. And for the different types of products involved, it's linked to economic use pattern changes or use case changes. That is why aviation fuel, during the time that we had COVID, the consumption of aviation fuel collapsed because planes were not flying into and out of Ghana. And in the case of petrol, there are more cars every year being registered. On top of that, we have a lot of usage of diesel because industrial output in some cases have increased. People are using more generators, a whole bunch of things. You cannot therefore make any claim that the increase in petroleum consumption, of gasoline consumption, of diesel consumption, etc., can be tied to SML unless you do sophisticated statistical analysis that isolate the historical trend. That says that if there was nothing at all happening except the original practice of more cars and things like that, this is the way the trend line will have looked. But because of SML, that has changed. But when you look at the map, SML entered the picture in 2020. The rate of increase was the same before and after. That's the kind of analysis we want to look at the KPMG report to see how they address that issue. Because without that, we cannot make any basis at all. There cannot stand any basis at all that there's an increment in consumption. On top of that, taxes are also linked to prices sometimes. Some of the levies and things that we have on the fuel are price sensitive. We know that the price of fuel doesn't stay the same. We have changes in pricing. These changes in prices affect the tax take of the government. How do you isolate the part that is due to SML? The only way you can do that is there's only one scientific method. You need a baseline for under declaration in the sector. Because remember that it's not that if the fuel consumption increased by 10%, everybody who sold that extra 10% will hide their taxes. They will pay taxes. It is some percentage who do so. It is identifying that percentage that then gives us the real measure of our risk as a country. They can say that, okay, anytime if fuel consumption increased by 100 liters, we know from this baseline study that 10 liters is underdeclared. In that case, that 10 liters costs us 100 cedis. So if SML has come in and we've seen that volume has increased by this extra margin, then we suspect that under declaration which are vanished from that extra whatever due to SML's work is this percentage. You don't use the overall increment, because otherwise you're assuming that every time we increase consumption of petroleum, everybody who sold that extra petroleum refused to pay tax, which cannot be correct. So you have to use the baseline to make the analysis. Secondly, everything that you have talked about in terms of increasing of whatever it has nothing to do with the problem we face, which CBOA, Ernst & Young, and the rest are talking about. What we face is not establishing that there's liability, that there's a tax that somebody has not paid. The problem is that when we've established that somebody owes the tax, they still don't pay you. That is why NPA has a list of OMCs, oil marketing companies, that have not remitted the tax. It's not like they are hiding their way, and because of that, the losses are all due to the fact that we don't know who has elected which fuel, and we don't know how much they've sold, so we don't know what tax we should collect. No, a lot of the losses are due to the fact that we know the overseas who have collected the fuel because they are DMS, and we know they've sold it, but they have still not remitted the taxes. Because remember that when I pick up the fuel, it takes me some time to sell, and over that range of period, unless you are still monitoring closely, if I've not remitted all the taxes, you will not know until you know for sure when all the fuel was sold. So those time lags and things create complications in ability to remit the tax. What has that got to do with flow meters and things like that anyway? Except, of course, that there is smuggling and other things like that, where those smuggling activities and the rest require us to also monitor the fuel leaving the country legally and those that may be living illegally. All of these matters are already in the NPA digital suite, which SML doesn't provide. So SML does not have capacity to know the trust that are leaving the country, sending fuel to Burkina Faso, whether they are genuine or they are not genuine, and things like that. So on what basis can we say that we can attribute blocking all or sealing all these loopholes to SML? That cannot make sense. It's the infrastructure as a whole that NPA has put in place allows that to happen, and that infrastructure was there before SML. And while SML has been there, it's still going on, and Ghanaians are paying for it. If all that infrastructure is useless and everything is about SML, then let's cut all of those things at Rock Africa, DMS. All of these service providers who are also taking millions of dollars. Let's cut them all out and leave everything to SML. We ensure that, and we are completely certain, that when it comes to try to expand this service to cover the minerals and the petroleum, it was simply a Japan issue at the time. When the Japan failed, somebody decided that, okay, if we cannot get the percentage of the royalties that we wanted from every ounce of gold sold in Ghana, then we'll do even more. We'll add the oil as well, and we'll create a mechanism to get a certain percentage out of that, because it doesn't make any sense to try and claim that because the tallow and whatever is lying about the oil produced, you would use some mechanism to try and establish that, and for every barrel of oil we produce, you would then be entitled to a percentage. What logic is that? So that KPMG says that we should move from a variable fee to a fixed fee. They are not explaining the claim, or the president is not explaining the claim to understand. What this contract meant was that every barrel of oil produced in this country, this company will get $0.75. Every barrel, every ounce of gold produced in this country, this company was going to get a percentage of the price. On what logic? This is what we fought against in Japan, and this is what we're going to continue to fight against. Seeing every tool available, including making representations to international partners and things like that, until there's a proper assessment and not a whitewash. Thank you very much.
You want to see the full reports, right?
Absolutely, without doubt.
You are disappointed that it didn't come along the press release?
RTI demanded.
Right.
So the president should do the honorable thing and release it.
All right. Right. If you have time, please hold on there because we may come back to you